Greetings and welcome to the People's Ascension for another RPGs Uncovered interview today. To go along with our current RPGs Uncovered demo play season, which is currently active, today we are talking with David Blandy, creator of Lost Eons and many other games, which I wholly recommend you go check out. But we haven't been able to get David on to the series itself. Time zones and life and all that. Fully understand everyone has their own things going on. So I am super happy, super excited to be picking your brain today, David, about this fantastic game you've set up. I know you've stopped in for some of the streams. We've been talking for a while. I am a big fan of Lost Eons. I've had so much fun setting up for this. Not only the learning the game episode that we did first, but the first episode of our demo play mini series. I don't know how much of you that might don't know how much of that you may have caught. That was a fantastic first episode to our demo play. The opening to that. One of my favorite openings to a series in quite a while, and I think it's a testament to this game's very narrative based design and keyword based design that really facilitates and pretty much necessitates some really in-depth creative thinking, creative storytelling, and collaborative storytelling, which is something I really love. Before we get into that, I'm going to keep my announcements very brief because we have a limited amount of time today. Yes, hello, I'm Jack. I am normally the DM. Today I will be interviewing. As I said, we already have the demo play series started. You can find that either in the VOD down below, over on our YouTube page, which also should be linked down below. We have the Learning the Game episode and the start of our 4-part mini-series. And I'm going to have the first of the bite-sized mini tutorials coming out, probably not today, but likely tomorrow. Either way, it will be before our next demo play episode. Other than that, I don't believe I have anything big coming up in the near future. But if you would like to keep an eye on what I have going on, follow me on Twitter at PPLS Ascension. That's also linked down below. And come hang out in our Discord. We have a bunch of fantastic creators on there. David's in our Discord. Our other RPGs Uncovered creators are there, and so many more. If you're looking for an interesting new game, I guarantee either somebody there has made it, is currently making it, or knows somebody who is. So stop by if you want to find some really awesome creators, pick their brains, and find some new games to play. Other than that, you can help support our site. You can help support the channel over on our support sites, Ko-Fi and Patreon, also linked below. That is enough jabbering on for me, however, because I am super excited for this interview, and I always have to shave questions off. So let me throw it over to David here, just to introduce yourself. Hello, very nice to, first of all, meet you face to face, and for being here for this interview. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your game, just as introduction.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jack, and thank you so much for choosing Lost Eons to run with and experiment with and play. And it's been a real joy seeing what I've seen of the series so far. It's always incredible to see the kind of idea, because all of a role play game really is a potential. It's a potential for something to happen at a table, and to see that realized, it's when something actually, a game really comes to life, and that's it's pretty special. So thank you for that. I'm a primarily a visual artist. I make artwork that gets shown in galleries, and for the last 5 years, I've started making role play games as part of that practice, that way of thinking about the world. I thought that there was incredible potential within role play games for thinking about ideas around the world and our place in the world. And yeah, Lost Eons is a part of that journey.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, let me just drop some links here to what you have going on so people can find your other games. Uh, Obviously, you do Lost Eons, but you also have Lone Eons, which I believe is the purely fantasy side of things.
Well, Lone Eons is the solo iteration of Lost Eons. So
Solo iteration.
yeah, so there's and actually, it has some quite fun tools if you want to do some like literally on the fly GMing, like rather than kind of do any prep at all, you could kind of basically run the solo game, but for
Hmm.
people. But that hasn't had a physical release yet. It had a little itch funding as part of the Zine month earlier this year, and I've managed to get some new art made by a really good friend of mine, Daniel Locke, who's an illustrator and graphic novelist. We made a graphic novel together a few years ago, and yeah, he's redoing the art for the whole of that. So it's going to be a kind of fresh new game that both introduces you to Lost Eons, and also acts as a sort of player's handbook for people who don't want to get the whole set, as it
Right.
were.
Very
So
nice.
it kind of lots. There's all the details on how to make a character, but then it's kind of focused on the solo game, so you can kind of
Mm.
play by yourself with a deck of cards and some dice, and yeah, kind of get used to the system that way, and have a kind of more kind of meditative journaling um, introduction to the setting, and
Mhm.
yeah, thinking about kind of possible futures.
Yeah, knowing what I know about Lost Eons, yeah, a solo sort of journaling aspect sort of version of the game actually sounds like it would fit right in. I'm not super familiar with solo games because I focus on tabletop mostly for the collaborative storytelling, but I know a lot of people who really enjoy solo games, so definitely go check out Lone Eons as well if you're curious. Uh,
Yeah,
so, sorry,
yeah,
you were
go.
gonna say.
No, I was just going to say that. Yeah, I mean, I I guess I got introduced to the idea of solo role playing through things like Wretched and Alone by Chris
Mhm.
Bissett, and just yeah, I made my own Wretched and Alone game, Babel, and yeah, it has a different pace and um, a different sense around it. It's more like you're kind of inside some sort of, I don't know, like it's kind of like a creative trance like state when you're playing a solo game.
Mm. Hmm. Hmm.
Whereas with a collaborative game, and I agree with you, in many ways I think the real strength of role playing games is coming together and creating a space together in our heads. I often liken it to virtual reality, but with like ultimate definition, because you're just
Hmm.
making it up in your head rather than relying on graphics cards. Anything can happen at any moment, and that's the excitement of tabletop role playing games. But yeah, it was it kind of felt like another possible avenue for the game. So yeah, Lone
Definitely.
Eons happened, and that, yeah, kind of wanted to experiment with some different mechanics. So that was fun too.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, experimenting with different mechanics. That is a big part of why I do this RPGs Uncovered series and why I like playing so many different games. And this is a very different mechanical setup in Lost Eons from what I'm used to. I have played Forged in the Dark games. I know you list that as some of your
Mm.
inspiration, and it uses a similar system, but instead of expanding on the number of dice you roll, you simply increment one of your dice a number of times based on your skills. How did you come up with that? What was your
Um,
inspiration there?
Yeah, it was a few things. First off, the game of Lost Eons came from a previous game that I made called The World After. The settings pretty much the same, but The World After was really inspired by essentially. I mean, it's kind of stupid to have all these different categories, but I guess one way of calling it trad games,
Hmm.
like thinking about Dungeons and
Right.
Dragons and like Warhammer, sort of larger book games, and I wanted to create as part. It was actually part of an exhibition, thinking about. It was kind of recreating an area of England called Essex, Canvey Island, as a fantasy setting, kind of 8,000 years in the future, after sea rise and after humanity, essentially.
Hmm.
And that game as a mechanic used dice pools, so like as you got better at things you got more dice to roll, and you were counting up the number of when you rolled you counted up the number of passes, which was either 4, 5, or 6.
Hmm.
And after creating that I really got heavily into more the kind of NSR OSR sort of scene, and I was, and also FKR got kind of inducted into the FKR collective Discord and thinking about role play with as little mechanics as possible, and kind of thought that there must be a more elegant way than having like 10 dice that you're kind of then counting to try and get the success. Maybe there's some way of understanding kind of as soon as you roll, knowing whether you've passed or failed,
Mhm.
or or there's a complication. And so rather than having the counting, it was just like you just read the top dice. Like that, I wanted it to be as simple as that. Now I'd seen Jason Toki's 24XX or 2400, which is a system which uses skills where, yeah, the skill is related to what die you use. So it's like D6, D8, D10, D12. D12 is the best. Um, but like all kind of one dice games, like Dungeons and Dragons, in fact, it's very swingy. So like kind of
Mhm.
you can roll a one or you roll a there's sort of there's no bell curve to that system. So I wanted to try and bring that together with the dice pool system, which is has a really nice bell curve because it's of probabilities,
Mhm.
because it's like um yeah, it's kind of that it's you're more likely to get the middle of an amount rather than kind of these extremes all the time. So it means if you're in the game supposed to be good at something, you're unlikely to really radically fail.
Mhm.
Whereas in sort of you have these bizarre moments in things like Dungeons and Dragons where the trained thief rolls a one on their lockpick check, and then the barbarian comes along, rolls a
Mhm.
natural 20, and like,
Right.
oh, they're the one that unlocks unlocks the door, and it's like it makes a kind of mockery of the
Mhm.
whole skill system. So I wanted to try and eradicate that to an extent in this game. So combining those two things, so you had like kind of a mini dice pool. So it's like a d6 plus whatever dice it is that you have for your skill, and you get the result, and it's just there straight in front of you. And
Mhm.
that's kind of that's where it came from. It's kind of, yeah, it was. I was working alongside Laurie O'Connell, and he had loads of great ideas for mechanics and things, and he was very skeptical that this would possibly work because he's used to using the Blaze in the Dark system, that
Mhm.
kind of, yeah, building a dice pool, and it's a kind of known, trusted thing. But I wanted to try and do something, kind of give a little twist to the thing and make it something unique, and give it. And I really like that thing that as you grow in skill, you get that the dice gets bigger, so
Mhm.
you can actually feel it in your hand, and the feel of actually rolling two dice is really nice because kind of that little clatter in your
Yeah.
hand, and there's a lot about that kind of tactility that is quite important to me. So yeah, then you roll and you instantly know, because of the system, it's like if you've got a six or over, you've succeeded at the thing.
Mhm.
And if the highest dice is a four or five, there's a complication. So, and if there's nothing, then it's instantly like kind of, oh dear, this is not
Mhm.
going well. So
Mhm.
it makes everything very kind of opaque at the table, and that's something in a way I got from 2400. It's um, that idea of negotiation, the idea that kind of before you make the roll, there's this sense that what's at stake. So you know that if you fail this roll, you're going to fall down the ravine. It's not like a
Mhm.
surprise. It's that that's what's at stake when you make this action. So yeah, there's always kind of player agency, player consent in a way built into the system.
Right. Right. Well, I think you did a great job covering all of that. I really am a fan of games that have a pass fail spectrum as opposed to a
Mm,
binary pass fail, like you've mentioned Dungeons and Dragons. I
mm,
really like the idea of failure, partial success, full success, because it really builds into the system a way for the narrative to keep going. A lot of times there's situations in Dungeons and Dragons where you fail and the narrative just kind of stops. Maybe you roll the same check again. Do you add negatives to that? What's the consequence for doing so? Is there a consequence? If there isn't a consequence, why are you rolling anyway? And then even situations on the other side where you succeed at a task but have really no direction of where to go or have
Mm,
no incentive to move on in any sort of haste. So I really like systems like this that uh, really codify a way for the GM to constantly be throwing new complications and constantly keeping the story moving together, moving forward. And I think that goes together really well with the clock system that you use here, which I know is also a holdover
mm,
from things like Forged in the Dark,
mm.
that helps both the GM and players understand where they are in the course of the narrative. So it's a game that really helps keep the story moving forward in a um, very clear, concise manner.
Well, I'm glad it works like that for you. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of, that's been my experience playing it, but it's, as the maker of the game, you never know whether there are
Right,
kind of gaps in the book.
right.
But, I mean, I've played it with other people. I've seen other people playing it, but yeah, it's always every new playthrough is a different experience
Mm-hmm.
of the thing, because people are always bringing their own table experience
Right.
to the game. It's a different thing. I mean, in many ways, I envisioned Lost Eons as a sort of like a gateway to indie games for anyone who's used to sort of Dungeons and Dragons,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of norm kind of skill based system. That's why I put so many skills in there, just so that there's
Hmm.
sort of like an analog to a lot of the skills that are in Dungeons and Dragons. So it's sort of a bit like you can understand where it's sort of coming from. I mean, something like 2400 again only has three skills.
Mm.
Each person is defined by these three things, and other games that I really love, like Into the Odd, again only three stats, and that's all you get, and that kind of defines a character. And I think that's in many ways that's really great, but at the same time, I think for people coming to it fresh, it can be almost too loose
Right, right.
for for kind of yeah, how am I supposed to know that I'm what I'm good at? It kind of, I think, having a slightly more delineated or kind of curated list of skills makes you feel like, oh, I should approach this in this way because that's what my character's good at. It
Mm-hmm.
gives a little kind of menu of things to start thinking about how to negotiate the world that you're encountering,
Right.
which is a strange world.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's not straight fantasy. It's not traditional sci-fi. It's sort of somewhere in between,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. Yeah, how have you found like kind of almost the world building as a GM in this
Oh, question for
this
me here. I'm the one doing the internet. No, no. I was actually going to bring that up. The world building aspect of this game, I've really enjoyed, and most notably, it's in the GM's tool, uh, the zine,
Mm,
that has the cooperative map making section. And
mm,
we did a bunch of that at the end of the learning the game session, our session 0. And between that and looking through the setting guide, looking through all the extra locations and critters, and examples and guidelines for creating havens and by extension any other settlement that you might want to come up with, we had a
mm.
fantastic time putting together a little map. We created an area of this world that we could play in for well beyond our 4 session miniseries,
Yeah,
just using what is a really simple. It's what a 7 step process for the cooperative map making
it
portion of
it
this.
yeah, it's incredible how you put that many different quite I mean each entry is quite detailed. It's not just like a one word thing. It's like,
Hmm.
it's a whole little scenario almost. But once you start sort of randomizing the links between those, suddenly it becomes a really rich world very quickly.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that was something that I kind of, I guess, is partly from something like Quiet Year, Avery Alder, but also, well, that's the kind of the map making as sort of a collaborative process. But then also things like Orbital, which is a game where you effectively create a space station together at the beginning, often from, yeah, it's just from kind of lists of keywords, and
Hmm.
yeah, had some really fun games of that. So it's sort of a lot of those sorts of games kind of creeping into the this, I guess, NSR project or
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think it does a great job of facilitating collaborative storytelling, not just from the start of the game, but from session zero. The
Mm.
way you look at character creation and the uh, really encouraging people to integrate their backstories together through the havens, making everybody more or less know each other or have some reason to know each other. We went a little different route in Genistar, having three characters all start out at three different places and then come together, having only one person start in a haven. Very interesting setup.
That's
But
all
we,
good. I really encourage that, honestly. I mean, I like with all tools, it's there to be, that's the default, and then
mhm,
it can easily be kind of
right,
messed around with. I mean, in some ways, um, almost for me in my mind, it makes more kind of sense in a kind of like traditional role play setting. That kind of almost meeting in a tavern becomes meeting in a cavern. It's
right,
like it's several different havens coming to get inhabitants of several different havens coming together and um, you know finding a common purpose of some kind. But yeah, it's kind of, if that energy isn't there at the table straight away, I think it's kind of good to give it as almost a default that everyone knows each other already. So
mhm,
it's like kind of you don't have to worry about that sort of, I don't know, who are you and what are you doing here and why do you look different from me, and kind of
mhm,
all of those kind of weirdnesses that are sort of skated over in sort of the traditional tavern meeting situation. It's like,
right. A lot
oh,
of happenstance.
yeah, yeah. It's like, but you want it to make sense somehow. So
Hmm.
yeah, it kind of gets over that. But I think yeah, it's very open to being approached in a very different way.
Hmm. Hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd like how the book is set up. I say book, a series of zines is set up less as a hard and fast, written in stone menu of rules that you have to scroll down and adhere to very specifically. It's set up as well. First of all, it uses a lot of keywords as opposed to fully pre-written out, say, spells and class features and racial abilities and whatnot. And I really like that. But I also like that so much of the GM side of things is based on example guidelines and random tables, which you can roll for or you can pick whatever makes the most sense for you. So it's really open ended and freeing, which is helpful for me as a GM who has been doing this for a long time now and playing a lot of different systems.
Mm,
I know some people really thrive on open-ended questions as opposed to multiple choice questions.
mm.
This is definitely the former, very open-ended, very keyword-based, very narrative, very collaborative. Um, but there's also you break it down into so many different very digestible categories so that if a player is used to picking from a menu, there's a lot of different examples and random tables again which you can roll or pick from that
Mm.
help provide prompts to define how their character would go about doing things.
Yeah, it's I guess my primary thought, I mean, after the experience of making World After, which was, yeah, it's a kind of 120-page book. It was very much in the mold of like, you read all this lore and then kind of make a
Hmm.
character and then kind of all. Um, I wanted something that was really like it just worked at the table. Like you barely had to read it at all. You could just
Hmm.
open the page and like kind of, right, okay, we're going into a defoul settlement now. What could be there? And like kind of, and then you
Yeah.
see just the key words, and it's like, all right, okay, there's a storehouse. What might be in the storehouse? And then that would be enough to kind of start the conversation happening at the table. The players start kind of talking amongst themselves about what they're doing and things, and the GM's just having a look and like, oh yeah, and I could bring in this, and it means that rather than having to do this great big kind of prep setup,
Hmm.
it's like it's just there for you. You just
Yeah.
open the
Yeah.
page and like you can play along. Don't have a name. Oh, here's a just either roll or like there's a little list of names. Oh, this will be Oknir,
Mhm.
like and then it just it's from my experience of running a lot of games and kind of
Mhm.
knowing what I need to keep things going. The kind of prompts that I need is often not kind of a whole scenario. It's more kind of just some sort of complication or an unknown thing or like kind of
Mhm.
something that happens that is slightly outside of the party's experience, and suddenly that kind of twists a whole space, and the story starts moving again. And
Right.
those are the sort of things that I wanted to work into it to make it flow, I
Right.
guess.
And it's more than just rolling a random encounter from D&D where
Mm,
you'd roll three skeletons. That's what it's always set up as what monster are you facing. It's never what the
mm,
situation is or what those monsters' disposition are or what the environment is like. And you have all
yeah,
of these tables and many more. I do really like in the GM's tools, page 8, it's pretty much all on a singular page, tools for procedurally generated play. So you can pretty much run through a game of this, a session of this, perhaps even a whole campaign of this with little to no preparation, which is freeing.
yeah. That's kind of what I was aiming for, I guess.
Mhm.
Is oh, you meaning like the journey encounters, like
Yeah,
for
there's rules for traveling both on the overworld, and then when you get into specific like dungeons,
oh
there's
yeah, yeah,
the point crawl adventure clock kind of system with the journey dies and the encounter dies.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of it becomes like a series of kind of stacked things that
Hmm.
you can decide what kind of space you're going into, and then that opens up this next area of like I don't know, you're going into a cavern, so it's going to be under the ground things. So what could they find down there? It's sort of like it just opens
Hmm.
up into the next space, and I guess that's what I wanted to experience as a GM was that feeling that I was discovering the world at the same time as
Right,
the players were,
right.
and that um, in a way I was as much a player as sort of someone guiding them through the space.
Hmm.
That that I was constantly surprised by this space, and it made me excited to kind of create it. And um, again, it was very much the space I was coming from, the kind of free Kriegspiel rules. There's sort of like loose, like almost system free spaces, and a lot of what gets made in those spaces is large tables of
Hmm.
possibilities, and you can see it in like in a lot of the work that comes out of that, like Oz Browning's work, Wendy's work, Reverend Quill's work. Like it's very kind of concise tables built, and but often kind of creating surprising possibilities that then kind of spark this next period of play.
Right, right. It's all about generating prompts for you to explore collaboratively as a table, rather
Mm,
as defining on the GM side what is going on and then throwing the players into it. So you as the GM actually gets to play along in the game pretty much much as anybody else at the table, which is
yeah,
really fun. I've been having a lot of fun with it.
good. I'm glad.
Uh, I will say this is one of those games where the GM doesn't really get to roll dice outside of these tables if you need them.
Yeah, sorry about
That
that.
that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Actually,
Well,
I think it's great because it really puts the emphasis on player action. It really facilitates them being proactive in what they're doing as opposed to reactive, which is a big part of what I think
mm,
you find in D&D and stuff like that. The players, the characters are reacting to the things that the GM throws at them. And when you take
yeah,
away when you shift that emphasis to player action, everything needs to be defined by what the player is doing. It forces the player to identify and think ahead and there's just a different dynamic between player and GM and character and
Mm.
environment that you get. What
Yeah, I
what was
think
your
so.
inspiration for that?
Um, yeah, it was. I mean, it was my experience of playing games in a kind of in that kind of FKR space, like games with Sean Smith, who runs games there. Andy Prentice, who helped to write some of those procedural rules. Yeah, he was the one that really encouraged like that kind of map making start to a game, really defining a kind of a clear impetus. Because really, he saw that the um, kind of defining unique aspect of the setting was that everyone starts underground and then they kind of discover the surface world. So how can you make that like kind of a key moment and make it organic and make it flow in a natural way? And yeah, it all kind of built out of that and kind of yeah built on all the tables, and then it was sort of a I guess a thought experiment that became an actual kind of procedure
Mm-hmm.
and a space. Um, I guess, um, yeah, I guess is also was quite heavily influenced by my experience of making a Wretched and Alone game. Actually, that feeling of you each, even though it's a solo game, taking that technology of like here's a card, it gives you a specific prompt, and that kind of defines your space for a while, and then another card it comes, and the situation changes, and somehow that I saw how powerful that was, and I think I wanted to incorporate that as a possibility
Mm-hmm.
into the Lost Eons system. And there's a lot of kind of very procedural work that's been going on in the kind of OSR NSR sort of world. I don't think Lost Eons is kind of alone in this. Um, I'm thinking of like Errant by and um I don't know, like Into the Odd, Electric Bastion Land. Or they really have quite a kind of procedural. Yeah, it's that phrase is what is it? It's rules like procedural
Mm-hmm.
heavy kind of kind of feel to it to try and yeah keep the narrative flowing. And yeah, it became really important that encounters weren't a creature that's going to react to you in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a kind of a whole mini scenario,
Right.
like a sentence, or maybe it's two randomized bits that go together, and you kind of the GM tries to make it make sense, and it just creates a sort of a as soon as you have uh, a thing that happens at the same time as complication happens, at the same time as maybe something else is there, like the number of combinations become almost infinite,
Mm-hmm.
and
And
it's
that's established through a negotiation collaboratively with everyone at the
yeah,
table. It's not just
yeah,
me as the GM forcing a single situation. You get a number of
yeah,
these little prompts that everybody, because you have 4 or 5 different people at the table, all bring different perspectives to it, and you get a wholly unique story out of it.
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that's what I hope, and
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to seeing where you go
mm,
with
me
this
too.
story now.
Let me pick your brain on a specific question
Yeah,
related to what we were just talking about. In the past episode, we were looking at one of the characters, Daphleria, wanted to hide from an oncoming Genistar assault.
right.
And there's not exactly a hide skill. Uh,
Yeah,
so we talked back and forth. Would that be reflex for her to hide? Would it be search for them to find her? Wait, I don't roll any dice. So what we settled
yeah,
on was it would be a search roll for her, but they that determined her the what she rolled actually determined their success. Uh,
Okay.
I was wondering how you would go about a situation like that because this game is very or character action focused as opposed
Yeah,
to.
I guess I thought that reflex was like the hiding
Hmm.
skill because it's so much about kind of agility. Um, I probably would have maybe encouraged them to roll around reflex, but I I mean, I like that approach. That's
It
a kind of
it was
negative
definitely
sales
a
approach.
it
Yeah,
was definitely a call at the moment. Yeah,
yeah,
because looking over reflex, it is defined in the book in the zine agility, poise, and evasion. Uh,
yeah,
and yeah, indirectly thinking about it after the fact, yeah, the hiding kind of really flows into there. But I'm so used to that. I do something and then the opponent does something hide
yeah,
versus search sort of thing.
yeah.
Um, but I guess that just goes to show there's a number of different ways that you can use the various abilities.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't think how you resolved it wasn't wrong. It was like
It
it sounds
it
like it
wasn't as
made sense.
intended. It
Yeah,
wasn't correct, but it wasn't wrong.
yeah. I was just thinking when you were talking about the GM not rolling dice that I'm building in some alternative mechanics for kind of I guess for combat
Hmm.
in the solo game where I borrow um, from Sean Tompkins' Ironforged that um, the world, or in this case, the creature or the being, rolls a kind of pair of dice for their kind of abilities rather than having a set difficulty score, etc. They have instead like two dice, one for almost their hide or their surface, and one for their sort of I don't know like attack ability. So sort
Hmm.
of like they have claws or do they have horns or do they have just kind of soft mandibles or something like. And so for each of those things, for their hide, like say it's a kind of soft hide, they'll have a D4, and then they've got like really sharp pincers. That's a D8. So then they'll roll those together, and the lower number becomes the kind of the partial success, and then the higher number becomes
Hmm.
the full success that you have to then beat. So it's like kind of you could roll that first, or you could roll it together with the
Interesting.
player, and as a kind of like a versus role, as it were. I mean, I'm kind of on the fence as to whether I prefer having something very solid and like kind of you're aiming for this number
Hmm.
and that's it, or whether it kind of has more kind of malleability because in that case, like if you fail there, then you're taking the damage.
Hmm.
Whereas with the setup as it's written in Lost Eons, it's like it's very much kind of more of a back and forth
Right.
thing. But yeah, it's but I don't know. I think they both have merit, but I just
Yeah.
like playing about with these things.
Yeah, oh, I'm a big fan of looking at mechanics and the rules of things and balance and all the curves and whatnot. We could go
Yeah,
on for much longer if we dive too deep into that line of thought.
yeah,
Uh,
very true.
so I will move on because I believe we're coming close to our time here.
Yeah,
And again, I could continue gushing about this game and have so many other questions to ask, but to keep things concise, uh, let's talk a bit about let's end this talk with the subject of the setting, which has been very interesting to me. We've talked about it briefly already. The sense that it's not pure fantasy, it's not pure sci-fi. It falls into that sci-fantasy region. It has that solar punk sort of post apocalypse situation, after climate, post humanity sort of situation. My background is in history, specifically ancient history. So when
mm.
you throw the number 8,000 years in the future at me, my brain explodes. Where did that number come from? Where did 8,000 come from? Because
um,
that's the stretch of the entirety, almost the entirety of human civilization.
yeah, basically, it was from that really it's a really dumb film. What's it called? It's the one where
That's a
everyone's
perfect answer. It's from a really dumb film.
yeah,
I love those that kind of inspiration.
where everyone's minimized into, what's it called, like downsizing, I think it's called,
Mm,
and they're all going to hide in a cave and come out in 8,000 years after like kind of the man-made apocalypse is
mm,
over. And I thought, well, that's a kind of it's a crazy amount of time, because like you say, it's sort of, it's from just after the beginning of agriculture in terms of
right.
humanity. Like it's really just like kind of unimaginably long ago, but at the same time as sort of almost within our understanding.
Mm,
Like,
mm,
it's like there are artifacts from I don't know, yeah, from ancient Egypt. There's supposedly 6,000-year-old trees in Japan. It's like, these sort of amounts of time that are kind of, they're impossible yet almost tangible, and I
mhm.
kind of liked like that possibility. And then of course I wanted it to be long enough to have some, like, for essentially for evolution to happen. Obviously it's not long enough, so
Mm,
that's why I introduced this kind of this magic element of
right.
S,
Yeah.
which kind of radically increased evolutionary processes. But it kind of, it's long enough for completely separate societies to kind of rise and fall within these underground
Oh, yeah.
havens for it to be like kind of, and then suddenly come out into a surface world that is, yeah, it's nature again. It was sort of,
Right.
yeah, I was trying to, with the whole setting, it was like an answer to my hopelessness about climate change, about the situation we find ourselves in, a way to create a space for hope and optimism in what we're living. We're living in essentially quite a dark time, and how to keep fighting and keep um, trying to agitate for change in this space. You need hope, and I wanted to create that hope for people at the
Well,
same time, enabling them to embody a space in this future.
hmm hmm Well, it's almost more of the hope that the world will go on despite us, really, because
Yeah.
humanity, as we know it, that's one of the main themes of the game, as far as I understand. Humanity, this right here, is 8,000 years old. Now humanity has four arms and bone spikes coming out of their head and moss beards and all kinds of other crazy mutations. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
almost like a restart button. We'll leave all of this nonsense in the past 8,000 years ago. That's too long for really anybody to have any major recollection, major history of, and it's kind of like just starting fresh, new slate.
yeah, yeah. But this, with this kind of legacy, and
Right.
there's sort of that our present time becomes ancient history to be discovered,
Hmm.
to have kind of
I
almost
love
like an
that.
archaeological relationship with this space.
Hmm.
What are the things that survive? It'll be like plastic toys and
Yeah.
things. It's like
Yeah.
they'll be sitting there in some kind of weird corner of a. I really like the idea of sort of a disused or broken haven, a space that was supposed to hold people, but it's like it becomes a dungeon. It
Right.
becomes the kind of going deep into it to find out about the deep past. It's sort of,
Hmm.
yeah, which is where we are now.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, something I've been playing with recently is a setting for Mars that's based
Right.
at this same time, which is kind of intimated by the setting that's in Lost Eons, but actually, like, what's
That's
there at
the
this.
cryorg.
Yeah, exactly. The Cryog are up on Mars. They've made a colony. It's sort of dying now. They're kind of, through extreme extraction. They're kind of running out of resources, so they're having to come back to try and
Mm.
get more resources. But this idea that potentially, like, maybe some of the 0.01 percenters that are alive today, maybe they live 8,000 years through, like, they're almost
Mm.
like liches
Mm.
through kind of cybernetic augmentation, through transplants, etc. Maybe they've kept their brain alive somehow, like, and it becomes this kind of real horror setting of kind of
Very
I don't
interesting.
know, exaggerated sort of, yeah, like, what is the world that they would create up there, and it's
Hmm.
probably be pretty dystopian. So yeah, it's sort of like I don't know, the boss's lair, and it's up there in space, and but
Right.
our our surface dwellers have to find a way to get up there to kind of
Hmm.
retrieve that space from this horror somehow. That's what I'm thinking anyway.
Yeah, yeah. No, one of my favorite things to do in fantasy setting games is to describe modern or futuristic technology through the lens of how they would understand it in a ye olde fantasy land. In
Right.
this first episode of Genistar, the Genistar Knights, it's a whole thing. I don't have time to get into it, but they showed up riding hoverbikes, old ancient world technology hoverbikes, but I described them as magically floating benches
Nice.
because the people on the surface, ye olde Fantasyland, they have no idea what hover bikes are.
Yeah.
Things like firearms, they have these long metal rods that explode every now and then. It calls
Right.
explosions in the distance. Like they have no concept of firearms, at least the way
Mm.
I've understood it.
Yeah. 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 No, that's perfect. That's completely, yeah, within the kind of, that was kind of the space that I was hoping to create.
Hmm.
Is kind of make even kind of very very possible technologies for us become other again, to
Right.
become ununderstood. I mean, it's sort of, yeah, it's sort of like the sort of space that um Alone in the Labyrinth with things like Pariah is sort of creating, and creating a Stone Age space, or and then, yeah, kind of trying to re-understand modern humanity through sort of making it strange again.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think it definitely accomplished all of that,
Cool.
and
Okay.
it sets up a it, the game sets up a way for the GM to take those themes, that inspiration, and really run with it in their own way. What I really like about how you present the setting in the game, there's a map that you have, there's the different societies that you have, default, the Cryorg, and all of that, and so many different societies in your settings guide. But it doesn't necessarily nothing's written in stone in any major way. It's not like picking up it's not like going into Pathfinder and trying to read an actual history textbook on Galarian, or the what's the one in D&D, the Forgotten Realms. The amount
Modern
of
realms. Yeah.
the amount of codified information that is the Forgotten Realms is just overwhelming, and it can be very difficult for GMs and players to inject their own ideas into it. But this is much more freeform.
Yeah, I always found that intimidating in a way. You're working with those sorts of pre-generated settings. There was always that anxiety that a player would come with more knowledge about the setting than you had as a
I've had that
GM.
happen.
And it sort of undermines, in a way, also the collective world building that happens in any game. Because we're all creating that space together at the table. So if someone's saying, no, you're wrong, that can't happen here, it sort of shuts a lot down.
Right.
And I wanted it to be open enough that things could be brought in to kind of embellish or kind of just help flesh out something at the table, but that nothing sort of set in stone and codified and made law effectively.
Hmm.
It's like it's there for you to manipulate and use at the table.
And I really enjoy that.
Mm, great.
Yeah, well, I know we are running out of time. Actually, I think we're already pushing the clock here. I know I got to get you going. I could continue talk. I have so many more questions, so many more thoughts on this, but we have limited time. It has been a great talk to have you with us, just to cover all of these different things. I think we got a great idea of your inspiration, where you came from in designing this, and your own perspective and how it is run and what's important. Do you have any, final parting words on your game? What would you say to prospective players, prospective GMs who are thinking about picking this up?
Um, say it's the most important thing is it's super simple.
Hmm.
Like, it's mathless. It's like you can pick it up and you can play within 10 minutes. You can essentially start playing a campaign within probably half an hour of
Oh
just
yeah.
picking up a book. So I think that's what I think is its great strength, as well as you know I I know I've kind of created it, but I think the setting is really strong, and it kind of it often gets people's imaginations going really quickly. So
Mhm.
I think that's also kind of one of its core identities.
Very thematic and
Yeah,
presented in a way that's very easily digestible through keywords and prompts and stuff like that.
right. Yeah, thanks.
All right.
But yeah,
No,
thank you so much for having me on. It's been really great to talk about it all.
of course. Yes, it really has been. I've enjoyed hearing where you've come from, and you've given me a lot of things to look up now. A lot of you've been dropping some names of different games that I'm gonna have to look up.
Oh, cool.
So I really appreciate talking with other designers because you get stuff like that, and you can clearly see the passion in your own work, and that's one of my favorite things doing. One of my favorite reasons for doing interviews like this is you can see just how excited you as a creator gets talking about your own game. It's just it makes me excited to run it.
Cool. Yeah,
Okay.
well, it's yeah, it's the process. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I will continue talking with you off camera
yeah,
on our own conversations about all of this, and I'm sure I'll be bringing up plenty of that during our demo plays, during the mini tutorials that I'm going to be posting. But that is all the time we have today for this interview. So yes, thank you, David, for joining me. It has been fantastic. I highly recommend anyone out there who has been interested in everything we've been saying to go check out Lost Eons or Lone Eons or any of the other great games on the itch page that is still up there in our chat for you to find there. And if you want if you want help learning the game and an example of how the game can be played, join us on Sundays for our Lost Eons Star demo play mini-series. We already have 2 videos up on YouTube and in the VODs down below, the Learning the Game episode and the first demo play session, and 3 more demo play sessions to go, real mini series, and then a critical analysis and final thoughts breakdown of the game on our final 6th week of the series. Really looking forward to that. Really looking forward to exploring more of these rules in play, and it's just been a great time. So, uh, last but certainly not least, thank you so much for creating this game and giving me the opportunity to run it.
oh no, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you for being here with me. Go check out more on Lost Eons and all of that. And I suppose I will see everybody back here on Sunday for more RPGs uncovered content. Happy time zone, everybody.